Hi, welcome to Bult for Life. I am Gerrit Bult, actor, personal trainer, former powerlifter, pro wrestler, and chronic pain thriver. Bult for Life is a podcast about living with the challenges of chronic pain. Our goal is to acknowledge, inspire, and relate to people living with chronic pain. I believe it is not only possible to survive, but to live a full life and thrive with chronic pain. No matter where you are in your journey, our mission is to give you the information and inspiration that will help you become Bult for Life. Hey guys, this is Gerrit Bult. Welcome to episode 2 of Bult for Life. If you missed episode 1, you can always go back and listen. If not, here's what you missed. There was this big, huge, massive weight, intimidating and scary, and I knew that I was going to be able to lift it that day. The air was just absolutely electric. Everybody was going crazy. They wanted to see me make this lift. I walked up to the bar. I got set. Feet set, hips nice and tight, nice and tall, chest up, deep breath, hands up overhead, hands come down, left hand up, right hand down, pushing feet to the floor, pulling up, and the bar ripped off the floor a lot easier than I thought it would. And it started moving up my shins, up against the big white soccer socks that I wore just for that reason, coming up over my shins, up to my knees, and then boom! Everything was wrong. I heard the weights crash to the floor, and as the adrenaline starts to wear off, I realized that something was really wrong. And then I really got scared. So after the adrenaline started to wear off, I knew something was terribly wrong. And then I really got nervous. I couldn't move my right foot up and down. The pain in my lower back was really bad, but the pain in my legs and my feet was even worse, and mostly on my right side. And I remember my ex-wife asking if something was wrong, and she knew something was wrong, and I knew something was wrong. She asked if I wanted to leave. And about that time, they had just started handing out the trophies, and I knew I'd won my weight class, and I had hoped I'd won Best Lifter. So we stayed for the trophy awards, and it probably wasn't the smartest thing I've ever done. I won second place in the bench with a 495-pound lift, and I got first place in the 275-pound weight class with a 730-pound deadlift, and I won Best Lifter, but, for the record, not worth it. So... little did I know how much my life had really changed that day. So we got back home early that evening, that same day, and I remembered one of the guys on our powerlifting team, a friend of mine, was a chiropractor, Dr. Fred Rui. So I gave him a call, and he was really great. He said, before you go to the emergency room, if you can, he said, why don't you come by my office? We'll take some x-rays and we'll see, if we can see if anything's going on in there. He actually got me into his office that night. He opened up his office, got me in for some x-rays to see what was going on. And what we found out right away was that I had a broken vertebrae. Now, when a chiropractor tells you that you need to see a surgeon, it's probably pretty serious. They normally are not big on surgeries, but Dr. Fred said in this case that I was going to need to talk to a surgeon. He also warned me that if I stopped urinating, to go to the emergency room immediately, because the nerves that were affected at the level where I had the injury affect urination, and that if the urine were to continue to build up, that it could kill me. I got through that night. The pain and the weakness was even worse. Unfortunately, I was able to get in to see the surgeon right away. And he gave me something for the pain and ordered an MRI. Now, that started my journey with medication in relation to chronic pain. And I think it's really hard to discuss chronic pain without discussing medications, because it can be a big part of it. And I know it can be a really sensitive topic, and there's a lot of opinions, and I totally respect everyone's right and views. For me personally, when the pain becomes worse than the dangers of taking the medication, I take the medication. And that's just for me personally. And hopefully maybe one day we can do a whole show on chronic pain medications and treatment and pain management. And we're talking about chronic pain here that does not go away and is insanely painful. It lasts longer than 8 weeks. In most cases is permanent. It's chronic. It's not regular pain that gets better over time. And in a lot of cases, it continues to get worse. At that point, I was experiencing pain that I had never even imagined. thought it was pretty tough, and I had been through a lot of things, and I had done a lot and felt a lot of pain, and I had. This was something completely different, something that I could never have imagined. And at that point, it was not nearly as bad as it would eventually become. So what the MRI showed was that I had a 1/2 inch free fragment pressing on the nerve, and that the transverse process, which is kind of like those bony loops that come off of the vertebrae, had been completely broken off. Now, the disc itself, to me, it was explained kind of like a jelly donut. The disc is like the donut part, and the nerves are the jelly part in the middle. Well, when the vertebrae get moved around or get broke or get out of whack, they put pressure on that donut part, and then that squishes the jelly. Well, when the donut part starts squishing the jelly, you get a lot of pain, and sometimes you lose movement in certain body parts, which happened to me. I couldn't dorsiflex my right foot, which means I couldn't pull my right foot up, and that was because of the 1/2 inch free fragment pressing on the nerves from the disc at levels L5, S1, which is the very bottom of the spine. So it also is the level that takes the most weight, which, when you have a fusion, which I eventually had to have, is the toughest level to fuse as far as the lumbar region because of the fact that it's so weight-bearing. So it takes longer to fuse. It takes a lot longer to recover, and it's really important that it fuses well because it's the most weight-bearing part of the vertebrae. I eventually talked to some other doctor friends of mine and decided to go with a neurosurgeon to do my fusion. We had done a epidural injection under X-ray camera to try to get me some relief until we could get the surgery scheduled, but really the fusion was the only option for me to really have any kind of relief or normal life after that accident. So I found a great neurosurgeon, Dr. Michael Malik. He was in the Chicagoland area, and he explained all of the ins and outs of the fusion to me, and that really blew my mind. I mean, I felt like I was already unable to work. I was unable to work out. I mean, I could barely walk, go to the bathroom. And now I was looking at 6 months to a year until I was back to normal. And what I discovered later was it was going to be a new normal. It wasn't the old normal that I thought I would return to. With that fusion, the limitations were no driving for 6 weeks. I mean, they didn't even want me riding in a car for 6 weeks except to get the stitches out from the surgery. So a fusion is where they remove the disc. They put some spacers in there to get your vertebrae back where they're supposed to be, and then they put bone grafts in there. And in my case, it was when they had first come out with synthetic bone grafts. They put the bone grafts in what they call a cage after they've lifted it with the spacers, and then they put hardware in to hold the vertebrae in place until those bone grafts fuse into bone. So instead of having that disc there, you now have this mass of bone that compensates for where the disc was. The big negative behind a fusion is that you lose flexibility in that area, and then the disc above and below, in this case there were none below, but they wear out faster because now they have to take the force of 2 vertebrae instead of just 1 like it's designed to do. So by all accounts, my fusion went really well. It went as well as it possibly could. However, I'm left with permanent nerve damage in my legs and my feet. And just because someone has a fusion doesn't mean that they're going to have chronic pain. In my case, I did. The fusion fixed a lot. It helped a lot of the pain that I was having. It got me the movement of my foot back, thank God. But I was left with permanent nerve damage in my feet and legs. For a lot of people, can be a great solution. It actually ends or almost eliminates their pain. That wasn't the case for me. And I really struggled to accept that. I think in the back of my mind, I really thought that after that surgery, I was going to be good as new. I was going to be right back where I started. That just was not the case for me. And it's not the case for a lot of us. When I got the back brace, I thought it was the end of the world, man. It looked like this big turtle shell looking thing that I felt was like a straitjacket. It had these 6 straps that hold it on. And basically what it does, it helps to support, the bone grafts fuse. Man, that back brace I thought was about the end of the world, and I hated it. But you know what? By the time I got the physical therapy and it was time to start working out of it, I didn't want to get out of it. It was my security blanket. The first 6 weeks after the surgery, I was able to start a walking routine, and that was really important to me. With a fusion, you really need to get walking and get that bone growing. It was important to me to walk, and it gave me something positive to do. That was one of the best things for me. I mean, it was great, first of all, to get out of the house, second of all, to be able to move, and I started to make some friends there, some of the regulars. Kathy, who worked there, was really super supportive and encouraging. There was a woman there, Sue, who was in remission from brain cancer. She had several brain surgeries, and that had left her disabled. There was an elderly gentleman there named Al that had a knee replacement. We used to joke that we were the surgery club, and looking back on it, I think we were a makeshift support group, Those guys really helped me a lot. I'd sit there for about an hour before I could walk back home, and I remember one time I was walking back home and I had a sneeze coming on. And if you've ever had a surgery, you know that a sneeze feels like it's the worst thing that could possibly happen to you. And I felt the sneeze coming on, and I knew I was going to have trouble standing with the sneeze. So I started walking towards this telephone pole to try to hold on to. And man, before I got there, I started sneezing, and I was sneezing and I'd take a step and I'd sneeze and step and sneeze and step. And I must have looked like a drunk Frankenstein walking through the neighborhood. And I finally get to the telephone pole and I grab onto it for dear life. And I'm hugging the telephone pole, and this car stopped, and they pulled up and rolled down the window and they asked, "Hey, are you okay? We saw what happened." And the guy driving the car said, "Hey, was it a sneeze?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "How'd you know?" He said, "Well, I had a fusion at L5S1 about 2 years ago. I recognized the back brace." And we laughed, and he could relate. It was nice of them to check on me. I always appreciate that. But once I'd get back home, then I'd have to rest for a little while. And then I started a routine that I would do with a 5-pound dumbbell, because that was my limit. So I got a 5-pound dumbbell, and I started out doing a routine, kind of basically just working on range of motion, getting the blood moving. I would literally do, in some movements, hundreds of repetitions. I had to do a lot of things seated and lying. But one of the most important things that I teach as a personal trainer is to connect your mind to your body. And whatever exercise you're doing, whether you're running or you're doing a 700-pound deadlift, you have to have that mind-body connection. And that's what those workouts did for me. It kept my mind and my body connected. It also kept the blood flowing, which helps with healing. It kept my mood up. I felt better after I did it. I'm thankful for those 5-pound workouts, as much as I was not looking forward to them. But I also learned to use isometric exercises, and isometrics are great, especially people recovering from surgery, obviously, because you're already limited in movement. But most people with chronic pain, no matter what type of pain you have, it tends to limit movement. And an isometric is an exercise done where you just squeeze or flex the muscle or muscle groups. And you can do them with movement or without. And the benefit without movement, of course, is if you're confined to a bed. You can flex your arms, you can squeeze your arms, you can hold them for a certain duration. And, anything we do in exercising and training, we want to build upon, we want to improve. In powerlifting, we call that cycling our training. We start with a goal in mind and we work up to it. We don't just go out there and push our bodies to the max right out of the box. It's the same thing with a workout. You warm up, you do your working sets, and then you cool back down. Well, training cycle is the same way. In a particular movement, even if it's an isometric and we're just, let's say, flexing the bicep muscle, you can do that and hold it for, let's say, 10 seconds. And maybe you do that twice. And then next week, maybe we try for 12 seconds and we do that twice. And we get up to 15 seconds, and then we drop it back down. As long as there's some kind of a progression, you can progress in either repetitions, in resistance, or in duration between sets. You can do shorter or longer time between sets. If I can do the same amount of work in half the time, I've made progress. And that's the name of the game, is figuring out what we can do and how we can make progress and what we can work towards. Another great tool that I used were resistance bands. And resistance bands are great too because, in my case, I had a weight limit. I could still use a little bit of resistance on a certain muscle group without putting the stress of the actual physical weight on my spine. A lot of people that I work with chronic pain, we use resistance bands, we use isometric exercises, we use light weights. Even people with chronic migraines, I've seen do well with isometric exercises. If you know chronic pain, you know how debilitating it can be. Sometimes it's just even the littlest of things. There's also a certain nervous system pathway that our brain can't feel pain and function a muscle group, do movement at the same time. So there's a certain benefit if you can move, if you can exercise, if you can initiate the nervous system to do something else. It actually helps with some of the pain. Our mind can only process so much at one time. So exercise has been a huge part of my life before, after, and during chronic pain. And I do everything I can to try to pass that on. And, and I think exercise is such a big, huge, vague, general term. But I think it's all about making it specific. What works for you? For me, my sport was powerlifting. Of course, I would love to powerlift, and that's no longer an option. But I can use some of the skills and some of the movements that I used in assistance exercises. I've learned that I can modify them, I can change them, and use them for me. I've had a lot of clients. I have clients that in the past played tennis, and because of chronic conditions were not able to play tennis anymore. They had built actually quite a bit of upper body strength waving a tennis racket around, and they were able to use some of that upper body strength and some of those skills and those motor neuron pathways that they learned in tennis. They could relate that to a bicep curl and to a tricep extension, and find out what works for you. And not everything works for everyone, and that's why I really encourage people to go out and find an individual program, educate yourselves, figure out, learn a little bit. The physical therapist that I found was awesome. He really taught me a lot. And I think it's so important to find somebody that fits with you, just like any doctor or any pain management person you work with, finding someone that understands you and someone that'll listen to you. And Joe was an athlete. He was also a weightlifter himself. And he taught me quite a bit about functional training. Now, functional training is basically just everyday kind of movements. And it was very important to someone recovering from a surgery, and also important to someone with chronic pain, because wherever our chronic pain is, as a general rule, we lose movement in that area. So the more we can work on movement around that, I think the better off we are. Joe turned me on to a really great book called Functional Training for Sports by Michael Boyle. It's a really great book. Anybody that wants to improve movement, it's not too technical or too difficult to read. Another great book that I found through the years was Becoming a Supple Leopard by Dr. Kelly Starrett. Really crazy title. And there's a story behind it. It's worth reading the book just to hear the story. You can find Dr. Kelly Starrett all over social media. His book is a lot more advanced, but there's some really great simple things in there that anybody can do. I think especially help people with chronic pain. So I'll put the name of both of those books and the authors in the show notes for this episode on bultforlife.com. One of the best things one of my first pain management doctors told me was, be patient. We're always coming out with new advances in medicine. And that's in orthopedics, and that's in treatment, and it's in anything that they can do. The spinal cord stimulator that I have now wasn't even available 15 years ago when I had that first accident. It's so hard to be patient. I use the example of I've developed a nerve condition called RSD or CRPS in my left foot. And when I first got this condition, I would be talking with a chronic pain therapist that I talked to. He was a sports psychologist, and he developed some conditions himself and eventually started working with people with chronic pain. And he would encourage me to be patient. I said, how can I be patient when I feel like my foot's on fire? And it's just like anything else, practice. I have to practice being patient. I have to practice living in this body that's changed and betrayed me. I felt betrayed by my body when the pain didn't go away. That had never happened before. Therein lies the chronic condition. But learning to live with this new body that I'm in, learning to live with the new conditions that I have. As one of my first pain management doctors told me, Dr. Diesfeld in Chicago, he said, pain can be a great motivator. And I found that to be very true. I've gotten to a point where I've had to come to a realistic acceptance of my situation, and without just giving up and saying, what's the point, And the point is to look at the things that I still can do. And I struggle with this at times as I've had progressive conditions and I've had other conditions pop up. But the realistic assessment of where I am, combined with resolve to really work on the things that I can do. And for me, that's all about what's gotten me to where I am. And it's all about what we want to do with this podcast. And that's to bring the message of what we still can do. To me, that's where the real thriving begins. And I've had to change my definition of thrive. That's another big, vague, general term. But I encourage everybody to personalize that for you. If you would have asked me 15 years ago what it means to thrive, I'd say deadlifting 750 pounds. You ask me now, it's being able to take care of my son. It's being able to go out trick-or-treating with him. It's being able to bring him to school and drop him off. It's being able to do a 20-minute workout at the gym with machines and weights. Things that I would not have defined as thriving before. But where I'm at now, that's thriving. What can you do, and how can you get better at it? For me, it's always constantly trying to improve upon what I'm doing. And I don't like the word try. My buddy Eddie Cohn, famous powerlifter, would yell at me if I used the word try. He's like a powerlifting Yoda. No try, do. So he always says to do, and I absolutely believe in that. Trying isn't enough. I need to work at my goals. I need to work at getting better. I need to work at the things that I still can do, and that's where I find the solution. For me, it was so overwhelming, and I find for so many people that I talk to, it's so overwhelming. But the solution for me, and I hope for you, is to go out and find the things that you can do. And the way that I've been able to take back some of the power is finding the things that I can do and to improve upon them. And I want to challenge all of you to find something that you can still do and improve upon it. Maybe it's knitting, maybe it's coloring. The idea is to build on it and to continue. Please, guys, don't give in to the chronic pain. Find what you can do. Let's focus on that. If the chronic pain is in your hands, do something with your feet. Go for a walk. If the pain is in your feet, do something with your hands. There's always something we can do. Keep at it, guys. Let's keep working towards being as well as we possibly can. For me, it's come to very small, realistic goals and building upon it. And I challenge you guys to go out and do the same thing. We appreciate you listening to Bult for Life. In future episodes, we'll be talking to chronic pain professionals, doctors, and plenty of other inspiring guests to help you on your journey in chronic pain. Our goal is to help you or anyone that you might know to live and thrive with chronic pain. And you can help us out by subscribing or giving us a review on iTunes or anywhere else that you hear Bult for Life. If you guys have any ideas, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to us at info@bultforlife, BULTFOR, life.com. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, Bult for Life. Thanks again. This is Gerrit Bult for Bult for Life.